Full disclosure, I've been involved in the house church movement for decades, and I'm curious why you don't believe that we should be making efforts to replicate the church of the first century.
Okay. So, first, his point is well taken. All through the New Testament, there are references to house churches. And the reason they met in houses is they didn't have churches. Right? The Christian church exploded into the world, and when they went into the Greco-Roman world, you're dealing with a new thing, and it would be, I think, just not realistic to look at the startup phase. Even today, if someone goes and plants a church in a mid-sized city now, and the church is 5 years old, they're almost certainly not going to have a building, right? And that's because they're 5 years old. Well, the church in the New Testament was 5 years old, 10 years old. They were just spreading out into the world. So I'd say give them a minute. As soon as they had the opportunity, they started building churches. And in Judea, you have where a number of the synagogues there became believing synagogues. In the book of James, it says I think it's in chapter 2, if a rich man comes into your synagogue, into your gathering, but the word there is synagogue, and you give him the place of honor, and you tell the homeless guy to sit at your feet, you're making bad distinctions, or you're showing partiality. But he uses the word synagogue, and synagogues were buildings, not houses, not house churches. And then in chapter 5, it says, if anyone's sick, let him call for the elders of the ecclesia, the church. So you have the church is equated with the synagogue, and synagogues were specifically designated buildings that had a set pattern of architecture and layout, and so consequently, and the synagogue was a model in many respects for the Christian church. So the fact that early Christians met in homes was simply a feature of necessity. And if we were in a situation where we had to go underground, if in a time of persecution, the church had to go underground, we would meet in forests, and we would meet in basements, and we would, we would do just what they did in the first century. But there's no prescriptive requirement.
But it seems that I've been to big churches, and as the church grows, you have to get janitors and somebody to run the tech and turn the lights on. And it feels like it industrializes, it franchises. And the deep and intimate community that I had at the house church, it seems to evaporate. It turns into a show. But in its small form, it seems more real. Isn't that true?
No. There are plenty of people putting on a show in living rooms. Putting on a show is endemic to the human heart. That's what we do. And sincerity is not a function of how big or little it is. When you have a big church, you're going to have big church temptations. When you have a mid-sized church, you're going to have mid-sized church temptations. And when you have a home church with your wife and your 3 kids, and you're the pastor, you're going to have those kinds of problems, right? So it's not I don't think it's a function of location at all. When it gets big and you need to organize and you need to have the janitor and the flow chart, the org chart, and all of those, you will have the temptations that come with that. It can become bureaucratic, programmatic, and frequently has done, right? But there are ways to fight that. There are ways to not go. There are ways to not cooperate with those temptations. Just as you could have a healthy house church, you could have a diseased house church. You could have a healthy house church. You could have a church that meets in a storefront that was in the grip of any number of bad ideas. You could have a healthy church that meets in a storefront. You could have a church with a tall steeple that is a bastion of evangelical proclamation, and you could have one that's just a bastion of Chamber of Commerce types.